Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about something that people are not talking about at the moment because everybody's attention is focused on the war in Iran. But it's been reported that currently 40% of Russia's oil export capacity has been disrupted and taken offline. 40%! We're talking around 2 million barrels of oil per day of export capability that's currently impacted. And this isn't theoretical, this is happening right now. But before we get into the details of this, can I ask anybody that hasn't subscribed yet to please hit that subscribe button? It really does help me with the algorithm and it only takes you a half a second to do it. And we've seen major disruption at key export terminals, including Primorsk and Ust-Luga on the Baltic, where drone attacks have triggered fires, forced shutdowns and halted loadings. Ust-Luga in particular was reportedly sealed off after significant damage, with storage tanks and infrastructure hit. Now at the same time, Novorossiysk on the Black Sea has been operating below capacity following earlier strikes and ongoing disruption. So what you've effectively got here in Russia is that 3 of the main export routes are all impacted at the same time. And that's before you factor in the problems with the Druzhba pipeline, which is also facing major disruption. So when people talk about 40%, it's not an exaggeration. This is a real physical disruption to Russia's ability to move oil out of the country. And that is a major shock, not just for Russia, but potentially also for the global economy, because oil and gas are absolutely central to the Russian economy. But if you've been following the channel, you'll know that Donald Trump recently lifted the waiver on some Russian oil, the oil that's currently floating around on the sea in tankers, because the global economy is struggling at the moment because of what's happening in Iran. Around 25% of all Russian government revenues come from oil and gas, and critically, this is a high fixed cost industry. You've got enormous upfront investments in infrastructure, pipelines, refineries, terminals, storage facilities, and those costs don't go away if volumes fall. So if you suddenly lose a large portion of your export capacity, your revenues drop immediately, but your costs stay largely the same. That's why they're called fixed costs, which means margins get squeezed very quickly. And in some cases in Russia, you can move from profit to loss extremely fast. And that's what's happening right now. If you've been following the channel, you'll know that I've been reporting on lots of Russian companies are currently struggling to make profits, but the oil and gas sector has been the one shining light, but not anymore. And previously, Russia has been selling its oil at discounts in the market due to sanctions. So the margins were already very tight in this sector. So now that we're seeing problems with capacity and reduced volumes, it's very likely that a lot of the oil and gas companies will also now be making losses. So this additional disruption is hitting Russia at exactly the wrong time. But what's actually behind all of this? Why is Russia in this situation? Well, the biggest single factor is the continued targeting of Russian oil and gas infrastructure by Ukrainian drone attacks. That's what's going on. That's basically what Ukraine is trying to do. But in addition to that, there's also significant disruption to key pipelines and ongoing issues around shipping and tanker movements. So when you combine all of this together, you end up with a situation where a very large proportion of Russia's export system is being impacted simultaneously. Now, in terms of scale, it's estimated that since the war in Iran started, Russia has launched around 4,000 drone attacks into Ukraine, which is significantly more than all of the drone attacks that Iran has launched over the past few weeks. So while people are still focusing on Iran, the intensity of the Ukraine war has not reduced. If anything, it's increasing. And Ukraine has responded, but instead of trying to match Russia missile for missile, which clearly they can't do, Ukraine has taken a completely different approach. It's focused on precision economic strikes. And this is where modern warfare is changing, because increasingly wars are being driven by drones rather than traditional systems like jets and missiles. Drones are cheaper, they don't put pilots at risk, and they can be produced at scale. So instead of having a pilot flying a jet, you've got operators on the ground controlling these systems remotely, and that changes the economics of war completely, because you can launch large numbers of relatively low-cost drones and overwhelmed defences. And here's the key imbalance. In many cases, the defence systems being used to shoot down are firing missiles costing hundreds of thousands of dollars to destroy a drone that may have only cost $4,000 or $5,000 to build. So economically, that is a losing trade. And Ukraine understands that. So this is not just military pressure, this is financial pressure. Now what's really interesting is what's happening at the same time in the global market, because prior to the Iranian war, the global economy was slowing down. Demand for oil was weakening and prices were under pressure. That's why oil was trading at $60 per barrel at the start of 2026, because there was just a general weakness in demand. And Russia's supply at that time was becoming less important. But now, with the tension rising in the Middle East and all of the problems with the Strait of Hormuz and moving oil and gas, oil prices have risen to above $100 per barrel. Supply risk is back, and that's led to a really unusual situation because the US has temporarily eased restrictions on Russian oil that was already at sea, which means Russia has been able to strike deals, particularly with India, worth around $6 to $7 billion. And in some cases, Russian oil is now reportedly trading at a premium to Brent crude. India is paying more than Brent crude because the oil is readily available, which is quite extraordinary. But here's the problem for Russia. Even if prices are higher, even if sanctions are eased temporarily, if you don't have the infrastructure to export the oil, you can't fully benefit. And there's another constraint here. Russia uses a significant proportion of its own oil production domestically. Estimates suggest that somewhere between 40 and 50% is consumed within Russia. So it can't simply divert everything to exports, it needs to use it itself, which means if export capacity is constrained by as much as 40%, production will have to be reduced and oil has to be stored or sold under less favourable conditions. So what you've got is a squeeze from multiple directions: infrastructure disruption, logistical bottlenecks, and limited flexibility. And all of this is happening at the same time. So this is not a simple story. This is a complex and evolving economic war. And it brings us back to the key point. Let's not forget about Ukraine, because whilst Iran is dominating the headlines at the moment, this war is still active. It's still escalating and still having a major impact on the global economy. Ukraine is not yesterday's news. This is happening right now. So the bottom line is that Ukraine has adapted in the war. It's built a powerful drone capability, some of the best in the world. It's targeting the most important parts of Russia's economy to hurt the Russian income, and it's creating real disruption. At the same time, global market conditions are potentially offsetting some of that damage by allowing Russian oil to be sold, which makes this situation highly unpredictable. But one thing is clear: the Ukraine war is not going away, and it's continuing to have a severely damaging impact on the economies of Russia and Ukraine, and also on the global economy. So I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments as and when they occur. I haven't forgotten about what's happening in Ukraine. I know I've done a lot of videos recently on Iran, but I've only got a limited amount of time, so I can't make videos about everything all the time. But I wanted to make this video today really just to highlight what's happening with regards to Russia's oil capabilities. Whilst they're being given the freedom to sell some oil to India, it's interesting that Ukraine is continuing to damage the actual infrastructure, which will prevent Russia from putting that oil into the global market. So hopefully you found today's video useful, informative, and most importantly, thought-provoking. If you have liked what I've said, or maybe you didn't like it, but you just thought it was interesting, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I'm currently running my competition where you can win my property or a cash alternative prize. Really quite an exciting thing. So if you'd like to get involved in that, scan the QR code on the screen now or click the link in the description below. I've got some really good deals on the go at the moment. So if you'd like to do it, have a go. Thank you so much to everyone that's supporting me in other ways. If you bought me a coffee or sent me YouTube super thanks or signed up as a patron or a member, really appreciate that support. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me. And here's something to put a smile on your face.